The alarm systems across the Galactic Council's deep space monitoring array screamed warnings that hadn't been heard in 3 centuries. Vexler, the senior representative from the Viridian Empire, felt his 3 hearts skip synchronized beats as he watched the data scroll across his holographic display. The readings came from a small yellow star system on the outer edge of the Orion Arm, a system the Council had marked as inhabited by a pre-contact species called humans. The energy signatures were massive, coordinated, dangerous. Within minutes, Vexler triggered the emergency protocol. Representatives from over 200 species materialized in the Grand Chamber of Nexus Prime, their forms ranging from gaseous clouds to crystalline structures to bipedal creatures of every imaginable color and size. The confusion was immediate and loud. "Explain these readings," demanded Krellex, the military commander whose species had served as the Council's peacekeepers for millennia. His 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the projection floating above the chamber floor. These power spikes could only mean one thing. Vexler manipulated the display with his tentacles, zooming in on the 3rd planet from that yellow star. "Earth. We've been monitoring them for 2 of their centuries. They split the atom, developed basic spaceflight, and we classified them as pre-contact. They weren't supposed to reach this level of technology for another 500 years. What are we looking at?" asked Plixen, a small mammalian delegate known for her careful analysis. 12 separate energy sources, Dexler replied, his voice grave. Each one powerful enough to tear through a planetary magnetic field. They activated simultaneously 3 hours ago. Our satellites also detected construction of what appears to be orbital launch platforms. Hundreds of them. The chamber fell silent. Every species present understood what that meant. An invasion fleet far across the galaxy. On the blue and green planet that had caused such alarm. Hyanwu stood in the control room of the International Space Development Initiative and smiled. Around him, engineers and scientists from every nation on Earth celebrated. Champagne bottles popped. People hugged. Some cried tears of joy. "All 12 fusion drives are operating at optimal levels," Mina announced from her station, her eyes glowing with excitement as she read the data streaming across her screens. "Hyanwu, we did it. We actually did it." Yuanwu couldn't stop grinning. 20 years of work. 20 years of bringing the entire world together for this single goal. Project Ascension wasn't just about building ships. It was about proving that humanity could cooperate, could dream together, could reach for something bigger than their small conflicts. "Power output is stable across all systems," reported another engineer. "The synchronized test was perfect. We're ready to begin construction of the colony modules." Outside the facility, crowds gathered in every major city on Earth. Giant screens showed the 12 massive ships in various stages of construction, orbiting the planet like a necklace of human ambition. These weren't warships. They were colony vessels, designed to carry thousands of people to Mars, Europa, and Titan. Humanity was finally becoming a multi-planet species. Hyanwu's communicator buzzed. It was his daughter calling from Seoul to congratulate him. He stepped away from the celebration to take it, his heart full. His father had dreamed of seeing humans walk on Mars. Now, his grandchildren would be born there. Back at Nexus Prime, the mood was considerably darker. Director Veximer of the Council's Intelligence Division presented his findings to an increasingly worried assembly. His species had evolved from predators, and his instincts for threat assessment had kept the Council safe through numerous crises. Those same instincts were screaming now. Look at their history. Veximer projected images of human warfare throughout the centuries. Soldiers, weapons, explosions, cities burning. They have fought each other continuously for thousands of years. Only in the last century did their conflicts decrease, and you know why? Because they finally developed weapons powerful enough to destroy themselves. Fear kept them in check, not peace. They unified their planet 80 years ago, Plixen argued weakly. The United Earth Council has maintained peace since then. Or they unified to prepare for external conquest, Veximer countered. We've seen this pattern before. The destroyers did the same thing before they nearly wiped out half the galaxy. First, they unified their world. Then, they built ships. Then they came for everyone else. Dexler felt old fear stirring in his genetic memory. Every council species had stories of the destroyers passed down through generations, an ancient civilization that had appeared suddenly and attacked without warning or mercy. It had taken the combined might of 100 species to stop them, and even then, billions had died. "What do you recommend?" Dexler asked quietly. "Quarantine, Veximer," said immediately. "We place the Sol system under complete lockdown. Nothing gets in or out. We station observation posts and prepare defensive measures." "That seems extreme," Plixen protested. "We should try to communicate first. Tell them we're watching." Kralak shook his massive head. "That could accelerate their timeline. If they're planning aggression, we don't want to spook them into acting before we're ready."
Ow.
The vote was called. Out of 217 species present, 193 voted for quarantine. The Sol system was officially isolated. On Earth, Taehun sat in his office at the Global Defense Coordination Center, reviewing routine reports. As Earth's primary defense coordinator, his job had become relatively boring over the past few decades. The most exciting thing he usually dealt with was tracking space debris or coordinating with commercial spaceflight operations. Then his screen lit up with an alert that made his blood run cold. "Sir." His assistant rushed in. "We're detecting multiple unidentified objects at the edge of the solar system. They appeared simultaneously across 12 different points along the heliopause." Taehyun pulled up the sensor data. The objects were maintaining position, forming a perfect perimeter around the entire solar system. They weren't moving, just watching. "Have we sent any greeting protocols?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Standard first contact procedures." No response. Taehyun frowned. Earth had prepared for this moment for a century. First contact with alien life was supposed to be humanity's greatest achievement. But something felt wrong about this. The silence, the perfect positioning, the timing right after the fusion drive tests. He picked up his secure line and called Hyun-woo. The celebration at the Space Initiative would have to wait. They had visitors, and they weren't saying hello at Nexus Prime. A young human named Jae-sung walked through the gleaming corridors of the diplomatic quarter, unaware that everything was about to change. He had been stationed at the Council headquarters for 2 years as part of Earth's quiet integration into galactic society. The process was supposed to take decades, carefully introducing humanity to the vast community of species that filled the galaxy. He was heading to his small apartment when Plixen intercepted him in the hallway. Her face, usually cheerful, was tight with worry. "Soon," she said quietly. "You need to come with me now." "What's wrong?" "It's Earth," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "The Council thinks you're preparing to invade the galaxy." Jae-sung laughed. Then he saw her expression and realized she wasn't joking. The smile died on his face. "That's impossible. We're building colony ships for our own solar system. It's a peaceful expansion." "I know," Plixen said. "But the Council doesn't. They've already voted to quarantine your system." Across the galaxy, 12 fusion drives hummed with power. Hundreds of thousands of humans continued their celebrations, dreaming of new worlds and new futures. And surrounding their solar system, silent ships watched and waited, convinced they were witnessing the birth of the next great threat to galactic civilization. Nobody knew it yet, but a misunderstanding of cosmic proportions had just begun. And before it ended, it would either destroy humanity or prove that fear was the greatest enemy the galaxy had ever faced. The celebration in Seoul was unlike anything the city had seen in generations. Millions of people filled the streets, waving flags from every nation on Earth. Giant holographic displays showed the 12 colony ships, their fusion drives glowing like new stars in orbit. Children sat on their parents' shoulders, pointing up at the night sky where the ships were visible as bright dots moving slowly across the darkness. Hyun-woo stood on a stage with other project leaders, waving to the crowd. Beside him, Mina couldn't stop smiling. They had spent so many years working toward this moment, surviving budget cuts, political changes, and technical setbacks. Now, finally, humanity was ready to spread across their solar system. "This is the greatest day of my life," Mina shouted over the noise of the crowd. "Nothing can ruin this." Hyun-woo wanted to agree, but his mind kept returning to Tae-hoin's call about the unknown objects at the edge of their solar system. Earth's defense coordinator had sounded worried, and Tae-hyun didn't worry easily. Still, Hyun-woo pushed the thought aside. Today was for celebration. Tomorrow, they would figure out who their mysterious visitors were, light years away at Nexus Prime. Jae-soon sat across from Nexler in a small conference room. The Viridian representative had... Commander Krelak studied the data with growing dread. They're testing their weapons now. They must know we're here. They're showing us what they're capable of. We need to act soon, Vexamor urged. Before they finished preparing their attack, Geneva, Taehan received reports about the asteroid explosion and immediately understood what it must look like to the Watchers at the edge of their system. He tried to send an explanation, but he had no way to communicate with ships that wouldn't respond to any hails. How long until Harmony's Dawn is ready? He asked Hyun-woo over a secure line. 72 hours. Maybe less if we skip some safety checks. Skip them all, Taehan said. I think we're running out of time. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, species watched their military forces depart for the Sol system. Parents hugged their children serving in the fleet. Leaders gave speeches about defending the peace. The propaganda showed images of the dangerous humans with their powerful weapons and aggressive expansion, and in Sol. Mina loaded the last of the cultural artifacts onto Harmony's Dawn. Art from every human civilization. Music from every culture. Scientific achievements from the entire history of human progress. She hoped it would be enough to prove that humanity was more than the Council feared. Hyun-woo walked through the ship one final time, checking every system. This vessel, built to carry thousands to a new life among the moons of Jupiter, would now carry Earth's future on its hull. If they failed, if they couldn't convince the Council, then humanity might face extinction before they ever really reached the stars. The countdown began. Harmony's Dawn prepared for a journey that would either save humanity or doom it. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the protection fleet moved into position, ready to defend the galaxy from a threat that existed only in their terrified imagination. Jae-sung waited until the guards changed shifts. He had memorized their patterns over the past week, noting the brief 3-minute window when the corridor outside his quarters was unwatched. Plixen had smuggled him a communication device, a small quantum transmitter that could punch through the Council's security systems for one brief message before being detected. He had one chance. One message to warn Earth before the Council discovered what he was doing and shut him down permanently. His fingers trembled as he entered the encryption codes. The device hummed to life, its display glowing softly in the darkness of his room. Jae-sung took a deep breath and began recording. This is Jae-sung to Earth Command. Emergency priority. The Galactic Council has assembled a military fleet. I repeat, a military fleet. Hundreds of ships from 17 species. They believe you are preparing to invade. The fusion drive tests, the moon construction, everything has been misinterpreted as hostile action. They are positioning at the heliopause. I don't know how much time you have. Please, find a way to prove your intentions before they act. This is not a drill. This is real. He sent the message and immediately destroyed the transmitter. Within seconds, alarms blared through the diplomatic quarters. Guards rushed into his room, but Jae-sung sat calmly on his bed, hands raised. I had to warn them, he said simply. Director Vexamer arrived minutes later, his face twisted with rage. You've just confirmed every suspicion we had about Earth. You're a spy. You've been feeding them intelligence this whole time. I'm not a spy, Jae-sung said tiredly. I'm just trying to prevent a war that doesn't need to happen. Take him to a holding cell, Vexamer ordered. Full isolation. No visitors. His guards dragged Jae-sung away. Plixen watched from the shadows of an alcove. Her small hands clenched into fists. This was wrong. Everything about this situation was wrong, but she was just one voice among thousands. And nobody was listening to the voices of caution anymore. On Earth, Tae-hyun's screen lit up with Jae-sung's message. He listened to it 3 times, his face growing more grave with each replay. Then he patched it through to the secure conference room, where Hyenwoo, Mina, the rest of the Harmony's Dawn team were conducting final system checks. The room fell silent as the message played. When it ended, Sujin stood up slowly, her diplomatic composure cracking for the first time. "Hundreds of ships," she said quietly. "We have 12 colony vessels that we just barely managed to make fly. How do we defend against hundreds of warships?" "We don't," said General Nam, Earth's military commander. "We can't. Our weapons technology is centuries behind theirs if they've been traveling between stars for that long. Our only option is to convince them they're wrong." "Then we need to launch Harmony's Dawn now," Hyenwoo said. "We're close enough to ready. The warp drive is stable, or at least as stable as it's going to get." "The ship isn't finished," protested one of the engineers. "We haven't completed the safety protocols. We haven't tested the navigation systems at FTL speeds. We're out of time," Mina said, pulling up astronomical charts. "If they have ships at the heliopause and more coming from their space, we need to reach them before their entire fleet is in position. Every hour we wait makes this harder." The decision was made. Harmony's Dawn would launch in 12 hours, while Earth prepared. Young xenobiologist Biora worked in a laboratory beneath Sol, compiling humanity's complete history into a format that could be easily understood by alien minds. She had been chosen for this task because of her work in universal communication theory. The idea was simple but challenging. How do you prove your entire species is peaceful when all they know about you is what they fear? Biora included everything. The wars because hiding them would be dishonest, and they would find out anyway. But also the art, the music, the literature, the philosophy. She showed humanity's progression from tribal conflicts to global cooperation. She included the Unification Accords of 2087. When the last nations agreed to join the United Earth Council, she showed the elimination of nuclear weapons. The global agreement to share resources, the combined effort to reverse climate change, will it be enough? Her assistant asked, watching the data compile. "I don't know," Biora admitted, "but it's the truth, and that's all we can give them." The data was uploaded to Harmony's Dawn in the final hours before launch. Sujin reviewed it carefully, making notes on which parts to emphasize in her presentation to the council. Hyenwoo and Mina ran the last simulations on the warp drive. Tae Hyen coordinated with military forces around the world, preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. At Nexus Prime, the council convened for an emergency session. Commander Krellix presented the latest intelligence from the Sol system. "The humans are modifying one of their large vessels," he reported. "Our sensors indicate they're installing some kind of advanced propulsion system. If our analysis is correct, they're attempting to achieve faster-than-light capability." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. FTL travel required sophisticated understanding of physics that most species took millennia to develop. Humans had nuclear weapons less than 2 centuries ago. The rate of their advancement was terrifying. "They're more dangerous than we thought," Beximer said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "First contact protocols require at least 5 centuries of observation before a species is ready for galactic society. Humans have achieved in decades what should take millennia. They're developing too fast, advancing too quickly. This is exactly how the destroyers began." "Or they're brilliant," Plixen said, standing from her seat. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. She was known as a voice of reason, but speaking against the military consensus took courage. Perhaps their rapid advancement isn't a sign of danger, but of potential. Perhaps they could contribute greatly to our civilization. "Or they could destroy it," Dexler said sadly. He liked Plixen and respected her wisdom, but he couldn't shake his fear. "We cannot take that risk." "Then what do we do?" asked one of the crystalline delegates. "Wait for them to attack?" "We intercept their ship," Krellix said. "When they leave their solar system, we capture them. We assess their true intentions through interrogation. If they prove peaceful, we release them and begin proper first contact procedures. If they prove hostile, we neutralize the threat." The vote was quick. The protection fleet was authorized to intercept any human vessel that left the Sol system. 3 patrol cruisers moved into position along the most likely trajectory paths. 12 hours later, Harmony's Dawn launched from Earth orbit. Every screen on the planet showed the massive ship as its engines ignited. The modified fusion drives glowed brilliant blue, and then the experimental warp field activated. Space seemed to fold around the ship, reality bending in ways that made human eyes hurt to watch. Inside the ship, Heian-Woo gripped his chair as the vessel lurched. Warning lights flashed across every console. The power fluctuations were worse than simulations predicted. Metal groaned under stress as it wasn't designed to handle. "Warp field is stable," Mina shouted over the noise. "Barely, but stable. We're achieving .9 light speed and accelerating." Sujin activated the communication systems, broadcasting on every frequency humanity knew. "This is the Earth vessel Harmony's Dawn to any listening ships. We come in peace. We are unarmed. We request dialogue with the Galactic Council. Please respond." For long minutes there was only silence. Then, 3 massive shapes appeared on their sensors, dropping out of their own warp fields directly in Harmony's. "Dawn's path. Contact," the navigator called out. 3 vessels. Unknown configuration. "They're moving to intercept. What do we do?" Someone asked. Heian-Woo looked at Sujin, who looked at Mina. They all knew they had one choice. The only choice that might prove their intentions. "Power down everything," Sujin ordered. "Engines, weapons, systems, if we had any, shields, everything except life support and communications. Make us completely vulnerable." "That's insane," the security chief protested. "If they want to destroy us, we'll be helpless." "We're already helpless against their technology," Mina said. "But this way we show trust. We show we're not a threat." "Do it," Heian-Woo confirmed. Harmony's Dawn went dark. Its powerful engines shut down. Its warp field collapsed. The massive ship drifted in space, momentum carrying it forward, but with no active systems that could be interpreted as weapons or shields. On the lead patrol cruiser, Captain Vexler stared at his sensors in confusion. The human ship had simply stopped, completely. His weapons officer reported that the vessel was defenseless. Its power signature reduced to minimal life support. "It's a trap," his tactical officer suggested. "They want us to come closer, or it's a surrender," Vexler said slowly. He had served in the Council military for 3 centuries and had seen many battles. But he had never seen an enemy make themselves completely vulnerable before. "Open a channel." On Harmony's Dawn, the communication console crackled to life. An alien voice spoke in broken but understandable English. "Human vessel, you are in Council space. You will be escorted to Nexus Prime. Any aggressive action will be met with immediate destruction. Do you comply?" Sujin took a deep breath and responded. "We comply. We thank you for the opportunity to speak with the Council. We are unarmed and seek only dialogue. Maintain your current power levels. Our ships will guide you." The 3 patrol cruisers took positions around Harmony's Dawn, forming an escort formation. The journey to Nexus Prime would take 3 days at their cruising speed. 3 days for the human crew to prepare their case. 3 days for the Council to decide humanity's fate. Inside Harmony's Dawn, the crew worked frantically to organize their presentation. Bior's historical data was formatted into easily digestible segments. Heian-Woo prepared technical specifications proving the colony ships were designed for cargo and families, not warfare. Mina compiled scientific achievements, demonstrating humanity's focus on knowledge over conquest, and Sujin prepared her speech. She wrote and rewrote it dozens of times, trying to find the right words to convince 1,000 species that humanity deserved a chance. That they were young and flawed, but learning and growing. That they dreamed of stars not to conquer them, but to explore them. On Earth. Taehyun watched the escort ships on long-range sensors. The protection fleet was still gathering, still preparing. If this diplomatic mission failed, if the Council rejected humanity's appeal, those hundreds of warships would descend on the Sol system, and Earth had no defense. No weapons that could stop them. No shields that could protect their cities. Humanity's fate rested entirely on the shoulders of Sujin and her small crew aboard a ship that was barely holding together. The countdown had begun. In 3 days, the galaxy would make its choice. Accept humanity as friends, or eliminate them as threats. There would be no middle ground. The 3 days of travel to Nexus Prime felt like 3 years to the crew of Harmony's Dawn. Heian-Woo barely slept, constantly checking and rechecking the ship's systems. The modified warp drive had been pushed beyond its limits during their escape from Sol System, and small problems kept appearing. A coolant leak here, a power fluctuation there. Nothing critical yet, but each issue reminded them how fragile their situation was. Mina spent most of her time in what they had converted into a broadcasting room. She had set up a continuous transmission showing Earth's art, music, and culture. Images of children playing in parks, orchestras performing symphonies, dancers from every culture, scientists collaborating in laboratories. She hoped that any alien monitoring their ship would see beyond the fear and recognize the beauty of humanity. "Do you think they're watching?" asked Biora, who was helping Mina organize the cultural files. "I hope so," Mina replied. "Numbers and technical specifications can be misinterpreted, but art speaks a universal language. At least I hope it does." In the ship's small dining area, Sujin rehearsed her speech for the 100th time. The words felt inadequate. How could she possibly explain all of humanity in a single presentation? How could she make them understand that humans were more than their violent past? "You're overthinking it," said Heian-Woo, bringing her a cup of coffee. "Just speak from your heart. Tell them who we really are."
Ow.
"And if my heart isn't convincing enough?" Sujin asked. "And we're probably doomed anyway," Hyun-Woo said with a tired smile. "So you might as well be honest." At Nexus Prime, the arrival of the human ship had become the biggest news in galactic history. Billions of beings across thousands of worlds watched as Harmony's Dawn approached the massive station. Some watched with curiosity, others with fear. Many with both. Plixen had been trying to visit Jae-Sung in his cell, but was repeatedly denied access. However, she had friends in the administration department who owed her favors. Through them, she arranged for a brief communication. "They're almost here," she told Jae-Sung through the secured channel. "Your people are coming. Are they safe?" Jae-Sung asked immediately. "For now, but the council is divided. Some want to hear them out. Others want to destroy the ship before it gets close enough to pose any threat. Destroy it? It's completely unarmed." "Fear doesn't care about facts," Plixen said sadly. "I'm trying to build support among the moderate delegates, but it's difficult. Vexmer has convinced so many that humans are the new destroyers." Jae-Sung leaned against the wall of his cell. "You have to help them, Plixen. When they arrive, they'll need someone who believes in them. I can't be there, but you can." "I'll do everything I can," she promised. The council chamber was already filling with delegates when Harmony's Dawn appeared on the long-range sensors. Dexler watched the ship approach and felt conflicting emotions. It was smaller than he expected, more fragile. The energy signatures suggested it was barely holding together. This was humanity's great invasion fleet. One damaged ship? "They're broadcasting continuously," reported the communications officer. "Cultural information, historical data, scientific achievements. It's not encrypted. Anyone can access it." "Another trick," Vexmer sneered. "They want to appear harmless." But Dexler was already accessing the broadcasts. Images filled his visual receptors. Human children laughing, human artists creating incredible works, human scientists discovering the secrets of the universe. He saw wars too, violence and destruction. But he also saw something else. Growth, change, evolution not of the body, but of the spirit. Director Vexmer Dexler said slowly, "I think you should see this. It's seen enough human propaganda. This isn't propaganda. It's their story." Commander Kralex was also reviewing the broadcasts. His species were warriors, bred for combat across millions of years. They understood violence in ways few others did, and as he watched humanity's history, he recognized something familiar. Humans were warriors too, yes, but they were warriors who had chosen to stop fighting. That was rare. That was remarkable. "How long until they arrive?" he asked. 12 hours, came the response. "Then we have 12 hours to decide their fate." On Harmony's Dawn, alarms suddenly blared. Heian-Woo rushed to the engineering section to find smoke pouring from one of the power conduits. The warp core casing is cracking, shouted an engineer. We're losing containment. Can we repair it? Hyan Wu asked, already knowing the answer. Not while we're in transit. We'd need to drop out of warp and shut everything down. How long until complete failure? 20 hours. Maybe less. Hyan Wu's heart sank. They were 12 hours from Nexus Prime. If they shut down now, they might not have enough power to restart. But if they kept going, the warp core could breach and destroy the ship. He made the call to Sujin. We have a problem. After he explained the situation, Sujin was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, We keep going. We didn't come all this way to turn back now. We could die. We could die anyway. At least this way, we die trying. The crew worked frantically to stabilize the warp core, bypassing damaged systems and rerouting power. It was like holding together a machine with hopes and prayers. But somehow, it worked. The ship kept moving. When Harmony's Dawn finally dropped out of warp near Nexus Prime, every being in the system saw it. The massive human ship, scarred from its journey, listing slightly to one side, surrounded by escort vessels. It looked less like an invasion force and more like a desperate plea for help. The council voted on whether to allow the humans to dock. The vote was close. 127 in favor, 90 against, with the rest abstaining. It was enough. Harmony's Dawn received docking instructions and limped into a massive bay, designed for vessels 10 times its size. When the airlock opened, Sujin stepped out first, followed by Hyan Wu, Mina, and Bora. They wore simple clothing, carrying no weapons, no equipment, beyond data tablets containing their presentation. The receiving chamber was intimidating. Hundreds of different beings watched them. Some had tentacles, others had crystalline bodies, some were clouds of gas held together by force fields. The diversity was overwhelming. A translator device was provided. A small device that would convert their speech into something all species could understand. Sujin activated it and spoke carefully. I am Ambassador Sujin of Earth. We thank the Galactic Council for agreeing to meet with us. We come unarmed and in peace. We ask only for the opportunity to explain who we are and what we hope to achieve. You will have that opportunity, Vexler said, his voice kind despite his imposing appearance. The full council will convene in 1 hour. You will present your case. Then we will vote on Earth's status. What are our options? Hyan Wu asked. Vexler hesitated. Acceptance into the galactic community. Continued observation with restricted contact, or quarantine with no contact for 1,000 years. He didn't mention the fourth option, the one that Vexamore was pushing for. Complete elimination of the threat. But it hung in the air between them anyway. 1 hour later, Sujin stood before the assembled council. 1,000 species represented. Billions of beings watching via broadcast. The weight of humanity's future on her shoulders. She began to speak. Members of the Galactic Council, stand before you today not just as a representative of Earth, but as a representative of hope. Hope that different species can understand each other. Hope that fear can be overcome by knowledge. Hope that the universe is big enough for all of us. She told them humanity's story. The struggles, the wars, the mistakes. But also the triumphs, the cooperation, the growth. Humu presented technical specifications of the colony ships, showing detailed designs that proved they were built for families, not warfare. The life support systems, the agricultural modules. The schools and hospitals, Mina shared humanity's scientific achievements, emphasizing the focus on exploration and discovery. The space telescopes searching for other life, the probes sent to study distant planets, the experiments to understand the universe better. Bora presented the cultural data, showing humanity's diversity and creativity. The thousands of languages, the millions of works of art, the countless expressions of what it meant to be human. We are flawed, Sujin admitted. We have a violent history. We made terrible mistakes. But we learned from them. We grew. We changed. The fusion drives you detected were not weapons. They were our first steps toward exploring our own solar system. The construction on our moon was not a military base. It was a refueling station for civilian ships. The energy spikes were tests, not threats. Then Veximer stood. Your words are beautiful, Ambassador, but words are easy. Your history shows centuries of violence. How do we know you won't turn that violence on us once you grow stronger? Before Sujin could answer, a commotion occurred at one of the chamber's entrances. Jae-sung burst in, having somehow escaped his cell. Guards rushed after him, but Plixen stepped in front of them, using her diplomatic status to delay them. Council members, Jae-sung shouted. I have lived among humans for 2 years. I have walked their streets, eaten their food, learned their languages. I have seen their kindness and their compassion. I have seen parents teaching their children to share, to help others, to be kind. I have seen strangers helping strangers for no reason, except that it was the right thing to do. You are biased, Veximer accused. You are emotionally compromised, no, Jae-sung said firmly. I am informed. I know them. And I tell you, they are not the Destroyers reborn. They are something else. Something we need? And what is that? Vexler asked gently. They are teachers, Jae-sung said. They can teach us that change is possible, that species can evolve beyond their violent origins, that fear doesn't have to rule our decisions. The council chamber fell silent. Every delegate processed what they had heard. The testimonies, the evidence, the passion in both human and alien voices. We will vote, Vexler announced. But first, I have a question for Ambassador Sujin. If we reject you, if we vote to quarantine Earth for 1,000 years, what will your species do? Sujin met his eyes. We will be disappointed. We will be sad. But we will respect your decision. We will return to our solar system and continue to grow, to learn, to improve ourselves. And in 1,000 years, we will ask again. And we will keep asking, for as long as it takes, because we believe in the possibility of friendship across the stars. Vexler nodded slowly. That is the answer I hope to hear. Council members, cast your votes. The voting chamber of the Galactic Council fell into absolute silence. 1,000 representatives prepared to decide humanity's fate. Sujin stood at the center podium, her hands steady, despite the storm of emotions inside her. Beside her, Hyenwoo, Mina, and Biora waited. Behind them, Jae-sung stood with Plixen, who had convinced the guards to allow him to remain for the vote. The voting system was simple but profound. Each representative would cast their vote through a neural interface, their decision recorded instantly. Green for acceptance, yellow for restricted contact, red for quarantine, and black for elimination. The results would be tallied in real time, displayed on a massive holographic sphere floating above the chamber. Begin, Nexler announced. Lights began appearing on the sphere. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds. The chamber watched as the colors spread across the display like competing waves. Green lights clustered in some areas. Red lights dominated others. Yellow votes scattered throughout. Sujin couldn't breathe. She watched the colors multiply and shift. The green section grew, but the red section grew too. The yellow votes seemed to be the swing factor, neither fully trusting nor fully rejecting humanity. Minutes passed. The voting continued. Some representatives took their time, reviewing the presented evidence one final time before making their choice. Others voted quickly, their minds already made up before the presentation began. Hyenwoo found Mina's hand and squeezed it. Biora closed her eyes, unable to watch. Jae-sung stood rigid, his entire body tense with hope and fear. Finally, the last vote was cast. The holographic sphere froze, showing the final tally. The chamber's central computer processed the results. Then Nexler spoke. The vote is complete. In favor of full acceptance, 103. In favor of restricted contact, 214. In favor of quarantine, 97. In favor of elimination, 6. A murmur ran through the chamber. The moderate position had won. Earth would not be accepted immediately, but neither would they be isolated or destroyed. They would have contact with the galaxy. But under careful observation, Sujin felt relief and disappointment in equal measure. It wasn't the victory they had hoped for, But it wasn't defeat either. It was a chance. But then Nexler continued. However, the Council recognizes that these votes reflect our uncertainty rather than a clear path forward. Therefore, we propose a test. Humanity will have the opportunity to prove their character through action rather than words. What kind of test? Sujin asked. Commander Krellick stepped forward. In the Outer Rim territories, there is a crisis. A plague has devastated 7 colonies across 3 systems. The disease affects multiple species, and our medical teams have been unable to develop an effective treatment. Millions are dying. Millions more are at risk. You want us to help? Heian Wu asked. We want to see how humanity responds when faced with suffering that isn't their own, Dexler explained. Will you exploit the situation? Will you demand payment or concessions? Or will you help simply because help is needed? Sujin didn't hesitate. We'll help. Of course we'll help. Veximer stood. The Council will provide you with all available data on the plague. You will have access to our medical research. If you can contribute meaningfully to solving this crisis, if you can demonstrate genuine compassion for species you've never met, then the Council will reconsider Earth's status. How long do we have? Mina asked, her scientific mind already racing through possibilities. As long as it takes, Plixen said softly. But the dying don't have forever. Within hours, Sujin was on a quantum communication call with Earth. She explained the situation to Aheyon and Earth's leadership. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Mobilize everything, ordered the Prime Minister. Convert the colony ships. Send our best medical teams. This is what we've been preparing for, just not in the way we expected. Heian Wu worked with engineering teams across Earth to rapidly modify the remaining 11 colony ships. The living quarters designed for families were converted into medical bays. The cargo holds meant for supplies and equipment were filled with medicine and medical technology. The agricultural modules were repurposed to produce nutrients needed for the sick. Mina gathered Earth's leading epidemiologists, virologists, and xenobiologists. Biora was among them, her expertise in universal biological principles suddenly critical. They reviewed the Council's data on the plague, studying how it affected different species with different biologies. This is fascinating and terrifying, Biora said, reviewing holographic models of the plague virus. It mutates to affect each species differently, adapting to their specific biology. No wonder the Council couldn't develop a single treatment. Then we need to think differently, Mina said. Instead of treating the Toms in each species, we need to attack the virus's core adaptation mechanism. Stop it from mutating. That's theoretically possible, another scientist said. But it would require understanding universal cellular mechanics across all carbon-based life. We're talking about fundamental biological principles that we've only theorized about. Then we start testing those theories, Mina said firmly. We don't have time for perfect. We need effective. 11 colony ships launched from Earth within a week. Each carried hundreds of doctors, nurses, scientists, and volunteers. They also carried something else: hope. News of humanity's immediate response spread across the galaxy. Species that had voted for quarantine watched in surprise as Earth, mobilized not for war but for healing. The journey to the Outer Rim took 2 weeks at maximum warp speed. During that time, the medical teams worked non-stop, developing potential treatments based on the data provided by the Council. They tested hundreds of approaches, failed dozens of times, kept trying. When the ships arrived at the first affected colony, what they saw broke their hearts. The colony was on a moon orbiting a gas giant. Beautiful purple skies and crystal mountains, now filled with suffering. Thousands of beings lay in makeshift hospitals. Some were covered in lesions. Others couldn't breathe. Some had lost their minds to fever. The species here were called the Virani, insect-like beings with gossamer wings and compound eyes. They watched with suspicion as the human ships landed. They had heard of Earth, heard the Council's fears. Were these humans here to help or to take advantage? Dr. Minho led the first medical team off the ship. He was a veteran doctor who had spent decades treating diseases on Earth. He approached the Virani with slow, Careful movements? His medical scanner held where they could see it. "We're here to help," he said through his translator. "Please, let us try to heal your people." A Varani elder, her wings torn from the disease, studied him. "Why? You don't know us. We have nothing to offer you. You're sick," Minho said simply. "That's all the reason we need." The Varani allowed them entry. Within hours, human medical teams were working alongside local doctors. Mina's team set up a mobile laboratory, testing their treatments on tissue samples before administering them to patients. Biora worked to understand how the plague affected Varani biology specifically. Adapting the general treatment protocol to their unique physiology, the first treatments failed. So did the second and third. Each failure cost lives, and each loss weighed heavily on the human teams. But they kept working, adjusting their approach, learning from each attempt. On the sixth day, they had a breakthrough. A combination of antiviral compounds that attacked the plague's adaptation mechanism while supporting the immune system. They tested it on volunteers among the sick, Varani who knew they were dying anyway and wanted to help find a cure. The first patient to receive the treatment was a young Varani child named Klixta. Her parents watched as human doctors administered the medicine, hope and fear warring in their compound eyes. For 12 hours, nothing happened. Then Klixta's fever broke. Her breathing steadied. The lesions on her exoskeleton began to heal. By the next morning, she was sitting up asking for food. Word spread quickly. The treatment worked. Not perfectly, not for everyone, but well enough to save most of the infected. Human medical teams worked around the clock, producing the medicine and administering it to thousands of patients. But this was just one colony in one system. There were 6 more affected areas, each with different species, different biologies. Different adaptations of the plague. The human fleet split up. Each ship took responsibility for a different colony. They repeated the process, adapting the treatment protocol for each species. Some required minor adjustments. Others needed completely different approaches. But the underlying principle was sound. The human teams were creative and determined. At the second colony, they saved a race of aquatic beings who breathed liquid methane. At the third, they helped crystalline entities who communicated through light. At the fourth, they treated beings made partially of energy. Each species was different. Each required innovation. But the humans adapted. Hyanwu coordinated the logistics, ensuring supplies reached where they were needed most. Sujin worked with local governments, building trust and cooperation. Jaesung, released from custody and vindicated, served as a liaison between human teams and council observers who monitored their work. 3 months into the mission, the plague was contained. Not eliminated entirely, but reduced to manageable levels. The death rate had dropped by 90%. Colonies that had been facing extinction were now recovering. Children who would have died were playing again. Families torn apart by sickness were reunited. At Nexus Prime, the council watched reports from the Outer Rim with growing amazement. Director Vexamore reviewed surveillance footage of human doctors working themselves to exhaustion, sleeping in shifts, using their own blood for transfusions when supplies ran low. He saw humans crying when patients died and celebrating when patients lived. He saw them treating alien beings with the same care and compassion they would show their own families. He had been wrong. Completely wrong. Vexamer requested a private meeting with Vexler. When they met, the director said simply, "I misjudged them. I saw threats where there was only hope. I saw weapons where there were tools for building. I saw conquerors where there were healers. We all made that mistake," Vexler said gently. "Fear makes us see monsters everywhere. The council should vote again," Vexamer said. "And this time, I will vote for acceptance." For months after the crisis began, Sujin received a message. The Galactic Council requested her presence for another vote. The entire human delegation returned to Nexus Prime, exhausted but hopeful. This time, when they entered the council chamber, beings stood and applauded. Species from the Outer Rim had sent representatives to testify about the humans' work. Klixta's parents were there, their young daughter healthy and vibrant beside them. Varani, Aquatic beings, crystalline entities, and dozens of other species all came to speak. "They saved us," said one representative. "Not for profit, not for power, but because it was right." When the vote was called, the holographic sphere filled almost immediately with green lights. The final tally was overwhelming, 843 in favor of full acceptance, 97 for restricted contact, and 60 abstaining. 0 votes for quarantine or elimination. Dexler stood, his voice carrying pride and warmth. "The Galactic Council formally recognizes Earth as a member of our community. Welcome, humanity. Welcome to the stars." The chamber erupted in celebration. Sujin felt tears streaming down her face. Hyenwu and Mina embraced. Buhora laughed with joy. Jaesung stood with Plixin, both of them grinning widely. 6 months later, Earth held a ceremony at the same launch facility where Harmony's Dawn had departed. The remaining colony ships, now officially designated as Joint Council Earth exploration vessels, prepared for new missions. They would carry not just humans but beings from across the galaxy. All working together to explore the unknown regions of space, Taehyun stood at the podium, looking up at the ships. "We reached for the stars," he said. And the stars reached back. "We are not alone. We are part of something greater. And together, there is no limit to what we can achieve." On Nexus Prime, at a small ceremony attended by only close friends, Vexamer formally apologized to the human delegation. Sujin accepted graciously. "You are protecting your people," she said. "We understand fear. We've felt it ourselves. What matters is that you were willing to change your mind when presented with new evidence. That's true wisdom." The protection fleet that had gathered to defend against humanity was disbanded. Its ships returned home, their crews carrying stories of the peaceful species that had turned a potential war into an act of mercy. And in a quiet moment, after all the celebrations and ceremonies, Mina and Hyenwu stood together looking at Earth from a viewing platform on Nexus Prime. "We did it," Mina said softly. "We proved who we are, proved who we can be," Hyenwu corrected. "Now we have to live up to it, every day. With every action, we have to show the galaxy that their faith in us was justified. Do you think we can?" Hyenwu smiled. "I think if we can turn an invasion panic into a galactic friendship, we can do anything." Across the galaxy on 1,000 worlds, beings looked up at their skies and thought about the humans. The young species that had come so close to destruction but had instead chosen compassion. The species that had proven that the strongest force in the universe wasn't military might or technological superiority, but the simple act of caring for others. Earth had taken its place among the stars. Not as conquerors, not as threats, but as friends, healers, and explorers. And in doing so, they had taught the entire galaxy an important lesson, that the best defense against fear is understanding. And the greatest weapon is peace. Humanity's story among the stars was just beginning, but they had started it the right way. With open hands, open hearts, and the unshakable belief that the universe was big enough for everyone to share.